Today, the fifth of the Planned Parenthood videos came out, and I'm just reading the description in The Hill, and it sounds genuinely horrific. How have you covered these Planned Parenthood videos on reliable sources?
Well, I think there was on reliable sources. We've been talking more about the debates. Frankly, we had two of the candidates on Sunday. I do think there is a reality here when it comes to the Planned Parenthood story. One of the realities here, you might not like it, you might not agree with me. I think one of the realities is that television producers might shy away from not just abortion, but other stories like this that are so grotesque, that are so awful to hear about. Now, and I'm not just talking about CNN here. I'm talking about other channels as well. Do you not think that sometimes that becomes a factor in what we see or don't see on TV?
It becomes a factor in how I program this show. So I know the reality of this. At the same time, though I have covered it, I have not given my entire show over to it. But now the momentum of these videos is becoming so extraordinary. This latest one has a Planned Parenthood official talking basically about, quote, if we alter our process and we are able to obtain intact fetal cadavers, then we can make it part of the budget that any dissections are this and splitting the specimens into different shipments is this. I mean, it's all just a matter of line items, close quote. That's horrific, Brian.
Do you think that, and I'm not saying this should be the way it is, but do you think it'll change one person's mind?
Yes, I actually think Planned Parenthood is suffering immeasurable damage if it gets coverage. So I
hate to say this, but I think people might be so dug in their views on issues like abortion that they're not open to hearing other sides.
Well, you can't really test that unless the coverage occurs. We've seen a lot of Cecil the Lion coverage. Have you covered Cecil the Lion on?
I have not. I'm happy to say I skipped that one.
On Sunday, you'll cover the debate, obviously. But what will you do about these videos?
Well, it depends on how, to your point, how much it gets attention in the debate, doesn't it? That's going to be an important factor. I agree with you that there's more momentum behind this story in recent days. I thought the exchange on CNN's morning show was really notable yesterday with the White House press secretary, Josh Earnest, being asked about the videos. It wasn't Earnest who said that he hadn't watched them, that he had not seen them, and yet was defending Planned Parenthood. That's a tough position to stand by, isn't it?
Yeah. Have you watched them?
I've watched a couple of them. I have not watched the newest one, though, that came out today.
Will you do so before Sunday?
Before Sunday, absolutely. I mean, I don't know how it works for your show because you're daily, but because we're weekly, we start planning on Wednesday for Sunday's show. And what's great about that, of course, is you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to really absorb all of the news stories that are out there.
Now, this is a very hard question because of the reality of losing your audience. And I've explained to people, when I read that Hill story right now, some people turned off my show. It's so awful. But at the same time, the news is Planned Parenthood appears to be running basically infanticide clinics. And so how can I not cover that? So how do you balance that, Brian?
Well, I have maybe in some ways an advantage by being a media show, so I can reflect on what the media is doing or not doing. In this case, this story has slowly gotten more and more attention. I think mainly for the reason I identified earlier, which is the grotesque nature of the story, knowing how awful it is. Of course, that matters less and less these days, and you and I both know it, because of Facebook and Twitter. I do wonder, this is one of those stories that we're going to look back and say, conservatives knew much more about it early on, and by the time it reached national consciousness, it was how there's sometimes stories like that.
The Chick-fil-A story.
The equation.
Yeah, the Chick-fil-A story when Chick-fil-A.
That's a good example. Yes, on a much less serious size, perhaps. But yes, there are those kinds of stories that percolate through the conservative media or through the truly liberal media, and by the time they reach mainstream audiences, I think there are some moms and dads, brothers and sisters at home, are scratching their heads saying, "What's the story about?" Whereas folks on the left and the right know all about it already.
Yeah, I think this has already gone to the deepest level of penetration that any media story can, and people may not watch the videos, but they know how awful they are. And I think we're headed for a government shutdown over this, Brian, and that's why it'll be interesting to see how it's discussed.